Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. I'm your host, David Tran. I'm also the co-founder of Xfusion.io. Today I'm joined by Dean Nelson. He's the CEO of Virtual Power Systems. Throughout his 30-plus year career, Dean has driven over $10 billion in infrastructure projects across 3 continents. His extensive architecture, engineering, and operations experience spans hardware, network, data centers, and infrastructure software at Sun Microsystems, eBay, PayPal, Uber, and 2 startups. He's also the founder and chairman of Infrastructure Masons, a professional association whose members represent over 150 billion in infrastructure projects in more than 130 countries. Dean is a digital infrastructure industry executive, advising startups, Fortune 500 companies, and investment companies. He's also produced numerous award-winning innovations in mission-critical facilities and compute environments and holds 4 U.S. patents. Thanks for joining the show, Dean.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is great. It's funny listening to the summary. Like, here I am at it's 31 years later, and it's like I'm just a geek, right? I started at Sun Microsystems doing component level debug, and so now here I am doing these projects around the world. Pretty crazy.
Was that always your plan? Like, did you expect to be where you are today, call it 20, 30 years ago?
Oh, I had a total master plan. Like, I knew no, I didn't know anything. Okay, I'll tell you this. When I was I grew up in Colorado, and I had this great idea that I'm going to get out of high school, and then I'm going to go get a job and make a lot of money, and everything's great. And so I signed up for this thing called Manpower. I don't know if you remember. There's still a company around today, but it's temporary labor. And so, and they basically give you the jobs that no one else wants to do. And so I spent all this time. I worked at. I swept out a rock crushing factory. Came home orange with the rock in Colorado, and then all the way down to like cleaning out the crawl spaces of 40-year-old houses. And nice little phobia of spiders that came from that point. But I realized here I am, 9 months into it going, I'm working my butt off and I'm not making any money. And I really don't like what I'm doing, And so I went and talked to my dad and I said, hey, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. So what do you think? Right. And he said, well, you were really good at electronics in high school, right? You aced every class. I'm like, yeah, it made sense. It was logical, right? The math worked and those things. And he said, so, maybe you should look at that. And because I looked at I'm also very visual, so I'm graphical. I love design and all those things too. And he said, so maybe you should look at that. So I went and I looked up a trade school, and I went to DeVry and got a 2-year associate's degree from DeVry. And then Sun Microsystems, so that was in Phoenix. Then Sun Microsystems came in, and they hired half my graduating class. And I suddenly moved to California. And I had no idea what the Silicon Valley was. I never touched a server. I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea what operating systems were. I knew nothing. I knew, address lines and electronics and that. And so went on the floor, and then I just started learning from there. And so it's all been kind of hands-on, and each one of those has been around trying to understand how things work. So I'd figure that out. And then this one, and then that connects to this. And then so I went from component level debug, and then I went into network. And then from network, I went into, planning. And planning, I went around into, so it's just like, I started doing technology all over the place. And then roles just kept coming back and opportunities kept coming. I'm like, that looks fun. Let's jump in that one. So I didn't really have to look for a job that kind of presented that way. But it was all about being curious, I think, and interested in what it was, because I really loved what I was doing comparatively to what I was doing before.
I imagine fun and curiosity is what you consider fun, and just fulfilling the pursuit of knowledge is what drives a lot of this.
I had a mentor, so a boss of mine. His name is Sri Shivananda, and he's the CTO at PayPal. So he ran all of the infrastructure team for PayPal and eBay, went under eBay Inc. when we were better together, right? And he had this equation that I thought was really cool in finding talent. And it was just intuitive. So first one is, of course, IQ. So got to find smart people that can do things, right?
Yeah.
Then there's EQ, and that's the emotional aspect of it, that they can handle situations. And then he said CQ, and that was a curiosity quotient. And I thought, interesting. He goes, people that are inherently curious find creative ways to solve things and, novel ideas that may not have been thought about before. And I thought, that is so true. That's like me. I love, okay, great. Let's wipe the slate clean. If we had to start over, what would we do differently? How would we do it? And that's always been a driver for me in just how to approach those problems. And I'd say that the thing that I I really, really enjoyed later on in my career is when I finally went from an individual contributor and thought I didn't really add any value in management at all. I can actually do stuff and get stuff done kind of thing. And then all of a sudden I started just, leading teams from a project management standpoint and those things. And then I really enjoyed that part. Then I went and started managing teams. And so the thing that I found really powerful is that if I was engineer on the other side and I had a manager that was basically telling me what needed to get done, but a manager that would say, you know what you're doing, I'm going to give you the problem, I need you to think about it, and I need you to solve it here. And given an engineer something like that versus, great, I want you to use this operating system, I want this programming language, I want this, like da-da-da-da, and dictating it, I handed these problems out to teams, and boy, did they shine. Like that just made everything roll, you know what I mean? And it made everybody happy because in the end of it, you're trusting those intelligent people and the curious people and all that to just go back and tackle it, and they are all in. You know what I mean? They're just in, and they go. And
I believe it. Yeah.
Productivity goes through the roof because everybody's enjoying it, and they're empowered to go do stuff, And I kept looking at this if I was on the other side, what would I want? I don't want my manager to go throttle me. I also don't want them to be in my way. I want them to guide me, and because I don't know everything, but also like just help me with that, but let me roll. And that's served me well, right? I had just awesome teams, awesome people, and we got to do a lot of really cool disruptive stuff.
So I look back to my time at Uber. I noticed we were actually at Uber at the same time for some overlap.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. One of my favorite parts, or one of my favorite conversations with my managers, are what you just exactly described. Like, hey, we have this very broad problem we want to tackle. Brainstorm. Do what you think needs to get done to hit this this end goal that we want to hit. And I feel like, oh, dang, those were really fun. And I think that's what I think is the missing component of a lot of managers if they don't understand just the fun component. Like, building is fun. If you just have a team full of people who intuitively love to build, just let them build, which is one of my favorite cultural values of Uber.
I think the thing that I really liked there too was the jam sessions. And, because you just got people in a room and you just jammed on things until, like a musician does, until you get to the answer. I did all-nighters at Uber many, many times, and it was more like we had Travis, right? When he was just notorious for this jam session. Land up there, and then they're in there for 9 hours, and they come out with an answer, right? Cool. And so we kept doing that because we had, how it was. The pace there's just so much stuff going on, and they kept throwing like mad, and they kept breaking every record every week, every time, and even during challenges that were happening, the service was exploding. And then they went to Uber Freight and Eats and, all health and all the other things. And so, from an infrastructure standpoint, because I was in the infrastructure team, we had a thing called Uber Metal, and that was, we did the foundational pieces, right? So think of all the data centers, the hardware, the network, right? The supply chain aspects of how you deliver capacity so that the shared platforms can now deliver the services out that Uber is doing. So that's the engine, right? And driving that, and then the growth, and forecasts were always wrong. They were always under, everything was just brrr. So just jamming with people on keeping ahead of that curve, yet not compromising, coming up with standard ways that we can have building blocks that can enable scale, that we can still drive costs down, but we can still have high performance, right? And efficiency around it. So those are the kind of themes that we go in, and we just constantly jam. I remember the teams where we jump into these rooms and just, all right, here's the problem. How do we solve it? And whiteboard. And it just was pre-pandemic, right? Where people could actually be in a room together. That was just really fun. I really enjoyed that part of Uber.
What's triggered your interest in infrastructure in the first place? Because I recognize you spend a lot of your time around that space now.
Yeah, like I was saying, I knew nothing about it, and I had a little different pathway to get here that. I guess, I've asked people in our industry, how many of you chose this career? Almost none of them have chosen it.
Oh.
It kind of chose them. So even if you think about it, if you're a software developer, you come back in and you're like, oh, I want to write apps. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go write this next killer app and whatever. But in the end of it, that app, there's so much stuff in software to manage things on so many levels, right? The path you take to get there, you have the skills, right? Like I learned electronics. I learned how that worked, but then I started applying to it, but I had no idea. I could have been fixing copiers, right? Electronics and copiers versus the foundational infrastructure that runs the internet of everything. And so I think what I found in this was that as I started diving in, like that component level debug stuff, I remember my first day on the job, I sat down at Sun. I'm in the manufacturing line, right? They'd had this thing called SWAT, the SWAT team, and we were going after the difficult boards, the ones that couldn't be fixed, that had failed multiple times. And so I'd have to go in and learn that subsystem and how this worked, and just a curiosity again to go back and pick up all those pieces. And so I'd review the documents, I'd go watch the videos, I'd talk with different people, and I get that, and I'm like, I get it. I know how these pieces go together. And then I'm like, okay, that's the motherboard, and I see how that works, but now I've got a storage system that goes to it. Well, how does the interface of the storage system work? Well, then what's RAID? What's so you suddenly start learning all these pieces. Yeah. And then it goes into a system. And then the system view, well, then how do those systems communicate and work together, right? And then it goes into this larger infrastructure. And so I learned it along the way. And what I found, again, we're in the best unknown industry in the world when it comes down to digital infrastructure. And look, one of the biggest problems, like iMasons, I founded that to bring our community together. And it's really, we're uniting the builders of the digital age. And we do that by enabling our members to connect, grow, and give back. We're a professional association of individuals, not companies, right? We're driving the individual member behavior about what this is. And so then we started working together on these pieces of, well, then what does it mean? Like, what is digital infrastructure? So we defined that a little further, and then we started putting pieces together. Then we started influencing and not lobbying, but basically as a go-to body for people to go learn more about what this is. And so, influencing policy for things, to sustainability, to diversity and inclusion, to technology, education, all these things started going together. But I guess my big thing is that when I talk to the group, again, they have not chosen this path. The majority of them, they've happened into a happy, rewarding career, right? But in our industry, there is at least 40% of the talent that's going to gray out. Digital infrastructure, foundational, right? So think about it. Most of the careers, most of the actual programs in colleges, et cetera, are gearing towards software, right? Computer science to other elements of it, but not the systems that come together. Like there's no digital infrastructure degree in any industry or any university that I know. There's missing.
That's a good point.
You've got all this pipeline of talent going in different directions. So we have to go back and help get the pipeline going, for people. And so when I hear that, 40% are graying out, and then also if you look at it, the majority of them look like me. White males over 50. That's a problem too. We're missing like half the population. It's less than 10% female in our industry. That's half the world, right? And then even less of that for other underrepresented groups. So again, you've got a lot of Caucasian males over 50 that are in there, and we've got to get this pipeline going, and we've got to get this talented, because then it goes about the curiosity again. So think about it. We had a scholarship program, we have a scholarship program, and one of those things we do is a capstone project. And that capstone project we've done with now HBCUs, so historically black colleges and universities, and Hispanic institutions, right? So it's like this consortium of 13 schools, universities and colleges. And we brought them together and we said, well, we're looking for talent, but what do you have? So they had architecture, engineering, finance, business, like a bunch of people. And they said, okay, we're going to give them a capstone project. It's going to be a year-long thing. So we created this, and it was just magical. Primarily because, first off, here's a brand new pool of talent that had no idea about our industry, right? Then you look at it, it is like all diverse. Like, right? There was like one Caucasian guy in the entire cohort. Where is it? Why haven't we found this pipeline before, right? Then you go in and the people start saying that, like, I really had no idea that access to internet connectivity was so critical to the success of a community. Such a simple thing when you think about it. Like, we all take for granted what you and I are doing right now. We take for granted that okay, we have this internet access. We have these devices. When you think about the other places that don't have it, it limits the opportunities, right? And so one guy I remember clearly, he said that he goes, I really didn't get that, but boy, if we could get edge connectivity to my community, everybody had broadband access to it, and they could do the same thing I'm doing. Like, that's a poster child right there. You need to talk about that. And then this person is thinking about, he wants to go pay it back. So then it goes to the community again. So there's so many incredibly, important aspects that come out of that, of us working together on it. And I mean, this sparked from a question you were saying about this, why do I like what I'm doing here? But when you tie it all together, it's like, man, it's so freaking rewarding to see people that love what they do, but also bring in new talent, because the next generation that's going to do this have to think about this at 10x or 100x of what we're doing now.
Something I appreciate about what you just shared is the fact that I think a lot of people have the deep understanding that diversity and inclusion is important, but it takes a massive level of effort to get something kickstarted off the ground. I just love hearing stories like these where people, it's like, you know what, there's a problem. And not only is there a problem, there's a solution. And not only is there a solution, I want to build the solution and help other people, like gather people to build a solution together. Because I think that's the ultimate dream state of any company, just gathering people around a common cause, and or even like just society in general, not even companies. Yeah.
Because look, the other thing is that we have a advisory council member, and her name is Sharice Richardson, and I put out an open letter right around Black Lives Matter and a lot of the challenges that were going on, right? And as a Caucasian male over 50, what is my role in all this? And I look at it going, I need to look at myself. Am I actually thinking about this the right way? Right? And I had a lot of debates with my daughter. My wife is Filipino, right? And my daughter is very active in lots of things. And we'd have debates about this. I'm like, well, no, I do the right thing. I have black friends. I have that. Like, all those are the wrong statements. Absolutely wrong. And what was neat is that Sharice Richards sat down with me, right? I'm the chairman of what we're doing. And she opened my eyes to a few things. And it just was like, if you can't put yourself in the shoes of other people to understand that, right? Like, here's an example. She said, I had to name my children differently because I'm black. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, so if I had a name, right, because I grew up with all this. I had to name my children differently to make sure that they weren't removed from opportunities. I thought, what? Wow. Like, it's just not even consider, right? So there's so many dimensions to this. And she had me read a book called White Fragility.
I'm familiar with that book, yes.
Right? And it's hard to read. I read it twice, right? I listened to it twice because it's just, you read through it through, I'm like, no, it can't be. And they're like, wow, it's inherent. There's so many things in this. And what it takes is champions to help drive. So if we're truly going to make a difference in diversity and inclusion, it's everybody that has to be involved in it. And all the stereotypes and all the preconceived notions and all the biases and everything else, unconscious or conscious, you have to address. And that includes people in executive positions, on boards, CE levels, right? You have to go back and put a mirror in front of yourself and really question, are you part of the problem? Are you part of the solution? Do you really understand? And I would say that for the majority of people out there, because the numbers don't lie, the majority of board members are male, right? The majority are Caucasian. You look at C-level, same thing. So there is not diversity at the senior level that there should be. Why? It's the same pipeline problems, right? If I can't see somebody that looks like me, I don't have aspirations to be able to go back and get into something like that. And so but again, there's systems in place here that are promoting people in different ways. Not that it's consciously biased to it, but it's unconsciously biased because we've limited the pool to these people. Well, if you don't have any females in the pool to be able to select it from, how would a female ever get into that position? So
you have the position now to influence things. What do you see as the very low-hanging fruit that a lot of people could be doing if they're in executive leadership now?
Yeah. All right. So great question. I'll give you an example at Uber. Okay. So we did a lot of hiring, and I was hiring senior level positions, right? So directors, senior directors, and we were going out to these recruiting firms and everything else, working with our HR teams and stuff. And of course, time is always the pressure. Got to get the talent, got it, right? And everybody's stealing from everybody else. You're grabbing from Facebook, you're grabbing from Uber and Google and whatever else it is, right? And so that's a challenge as well. And so I had them bring back candidates, and I had one specific category I was looking for, and to run this business for me, right? Hardware. And so we had really qualified candidates come in. I had like 7 or 8 different, qualified candidates. They were all male, right? First off, I'm like, okay. So I went to HR and I said, how do we get a pipeline that actually get diverse things? They're like, well, we have limitations in our policies that we can't dictate what it is. I'm like, okay, I understand, but how do I get diverse candidates in my pipeline? So I personally had to go to the recruiters and say, I love the fact that you brought me 7 candidates that are very strong. I need you to bring me other diverse candidates. I need you to look harder, right? But it took me doing that. And lo and behold, I had a few more people come back in. And the person we brought back in, her name is Gloria Lau. She's awesome. She came in and she blew everybody away. Not because she's female, not because she's Asian. It literally because of that person's talent and capabilities, right? She came in and she was bar none above everybody else. Now, that would have not happened if I didn't push. So my point with this is that as executives, you have a responsibility to drive the outcome. Now, remember, there's a big difference between checking a box and changing culture, right? I didn't check a box. I had a bar, and I went and found the people that were there. It's a smaller pool to find. That means you have to work harder for it, right? But if you don't lead by example and actually drive those things, what do you expect your managers and everybody else is going to do? They're going to hit the easy button. What's the easy button? There's less diverse talent, so we shouldn't be able to get diverse talent. Okay, then you're not trying hard enough. Sorry, I'm a little passionate about this because
No, I love it. I love it.
I'm in a position right now that I can influence a lot of things, and I don't take that lightly. So whether it's what we're doing at Infrastructure Masons as a chairman and founder, because one of our core tenets is diversity and inclusion. Okay, is that just lip service, or is that actually something real? Right? And we got a lot of passionate people inside of our organization that really go after it. And so the commitments and the things, and then that just attracts more people because they want to be part of that,
Yeah.
Cultures and companies are the same way. And I think it is even more critical for senior leaders to be critical on themselves and check. As a matter of fact, sit down with somebody and have them ask you those hard questions. Read White Fragility. Literally read it and listen. Because you can, justify away all types of different things. Because that's not me. No, I have this and this.
Right.
Listen, like really listen. That's what Charisse taught me in that one. And I'm so grateful for her because she first off, she took the time to actually spend time with me, right? When I thought I was okay. She took the time. Imagine having to constantly go back and tell the same story to, right? Caucasian men. And the challenge, it's tiring. Yeah. So the fact that she did that to help me, I just really appreciate it. And so I think that's the, I don't know, that's a couple factors that I've learned, and look, I'm not perfect. I'm doing everything I can to be as good as I can on these things. But in the end, my gauge is, honestly, I want my wife and my daughter to say that I've done the right thing.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So before the show, we were talking about like where we were, and currently, prior to COVID, I spent all of my life in California, particularly within Los Angeles, and then later the SF Bay Area. And I intentionally chose to move to Houston out of all places, despite not really having connections here, just because on paper is one of the more diverse cities. I just don't want to know like what life is like in that sort of environment, because I recognize. So I'm Vietnamese American. My mom and dad came here during the Vietnam War, and their experiences were like not the greatest. Lots of, there's probably not a better way to say it, but like there was a lot of racism that they faced, and I think it's companies that gave them an opportunity, that gave them the capacity to give me an upbringing, and I have the capacity to be where I am today. And I'm
100%.
just grateful for seeing that journey and story replicate in more places and across more levels.
Yeah, and it's those stories. Like, and if people can't, if you assume you understand, like I don't know what your parents went through. I can empathize, with, but I didn't go through those things that they went through. And so when you think about privilege, and this is a big thing that Cerise and I talked about before, is that, privilege itself is, if I go in and try to get a job, right? Do I work hard? Yeah. Am I motivated? Yeah. Do I have CQ, IQ, EQ, and all those things? Yeah. But if I have 4 times more opportunity to get that job compared to somebody else who is not a Caucasian male, that means they have to work 4 times harder to get the same opportunity I have. Now, does that mean that I have privilege and I take advantage of that privilege? No, it's just inherent in our culture, right, in the United States today, that because you're a white male, you get more opportunities. That means you have privilege, whether you like it or not. It's a tough thing to accept, you know what I mean? Mm. And so when you back up going, then how do you give more opportunities to balance the scale? And, I look at like Nancy Novak is on our advisory council, and she works at Compass Data Center. She's the chief innovation officer. She's awesome. And she gave this example because her daughter teaches equity versus equality, right? Mm-hmm. You've probably heard this before, but that whole concept,
I'm familiar with this.
Yeah, that concept really resonated with me. Like, okay, great, equality. Everybody should have equal chances to it, but not if you're starting in a different place. Yeah. So, the example they use, of course, is the fence and kids that are trying to look over the fence. And here you give them all a box so they can get up. But one kid is 4 feet high, one is 3, and one is 2 foot high. And so the 2 foot one can't see over. So you need to have equity to get people to an actual balanced thing so you can have equality. Very different than equality. We should have equal pay, right? We should have equal thing. But you have to get to the point where you can give that equality. But if you don't enable that equity, right, where everybody's got the same balance to be able to get there, you will never get there. That was a huge learning for me. Yeah.
How do you think about this from a leader of people perspective? Because you are leading the people who lead the people who lead the people who make the hiring decision. Like, how do you make sure that lesson gets translated effectively across multiple layers? And you also advise companies. I imagine the dilution there is even more significant.
Yeah. So let's see, how can I put this? All right. Number one thing, you have to lead by example. If you're not, it doesn't matter. Right. Because if you're taking the easy button, everybody else is going to take the easy button because, well, he's not worried about it. Why should I worry about it? And then the other one is that constant checks and balances in process. So specifically, let's take board, for example, right? Board level appointments. Start at the most senior. Now, if you look at like my board at Virtual Power Systems, right, was all male. So I took over the team, et cetera. And then I thought, okay. So I was working with the group and trying to figure out, and they're like, yeah, it's hard to find board talent, right? Diverse board talent. And I said, okay, well, we need to try a little harder. Well, the beauty of what I have is my community is made up of people that care about diversity, right? Care about this and are highly effective. They're already senior, right?
Very important.
so here you've got a pool already that we've started putting together because like-minded people coming together to go solve a problem. Yeah. And so I thought, like, okay, I'm about to appoint board members and do these things. I need to lead by example. So when we recruited, right, when we're looking for for board members, same thing. I need to go see who else is out there and who's going to add value. And so we started increasing that one. And what was really neat is we added 3 board members, right? So I added 2 just powerhouse female executives, right? And 1 other Caucasian male executive. But the first time ever we have diversity within our board when it comes to a gender standpoint. And they kick ass. So it's just not, it's like, the whole point here is that, so Ali Fenn is the president of IT Renew, right? She's a competition pro sports, like she's just insane, right? So like on every level, she's just competitive and awesome. And so she came back in, right, and joined the board. And then Amber Caramella. So she's the executive sponsor for I Am Women at Infrastructure Masons, right? So she's also the chief revenue officer for Neutrality, which is a company that's driving interconnectivity right across their portfolio. Again, she knows everybody in our sector, literally. So getting her on board, same thing. It's just they're so effective because of who they are, their capabilities, and their network. But again, if you weren't looking, you would miss that opportunity. So what I'd say is that, again, executive levels, you need to challenge yourself and you need to try harder, because in the end, the only way those percentages change is if you make those percentages change. But do not joke with yourself to say, oh, I got a diverse hire because I hired this person. You need to make a conscious choice about finding people, right? And make sure that you're bringing in talent so that you can assess, you can pull in the right people from a diversity standpoint too. And so that's one. Then you go down to C-level, right? A decision, same stuff. Do you have a pool of talent? Then you go back into the managers and the other. So you have to distill, I think, in the teams, this way of thinking, because quotas don't work.
Yeah.
It's the wrong thing, right? You need to go back and actually have processes that open the opportunity to bring in more people to be considered. Because if you don't have them in the door, you're never going to get them hired.
Agreed. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going very I'm very passive. I didn't expect to go this direction, but it's just such an important part of
it is, yeah,
a gap in our industry, and I think in so many different industries as well. But especially in digital infrastructure, because what we do is run the world right now. Think about it. The Internet of Everything goes through the stuff that we build. The world doesn't run without the foundational infrastructure that we roll back out. And when I say we, it's collectively. Think of the Googles, Microsofts, Apples, Amazon, Uber, eBay, like all of them that run all these capabilities. The banks, right? To everybody's connected. That foundational infrastructure is there. And so we have, and again, we have less than 10% female, and even less than that when it comes down to other underrepresented groups.
Taking a slight turn, now that you're further along in your career, what advice would you give to those who are starting out now? Just not necessarily in the domain of infrastructure, but just in general.
Yeah. So this old guy, did you just basically call me an old guy? Yeah.
Experience and why. There
you go. Nice recovery. Yeah. I resemble that remark. I have blonde hair, but it's a lot easier to hide the gray. There you go. I would say it goes back to two things. And I'm going to basically link this to two people. My dad first. Relationships matter. Relationships are really everything, and whether it's in personal life or whether it's in your business life, you are who you know, right? And there was a guy named Lee, I forgot his last name, but he said, "Your network is your net worth."
I'm very familiar with that.
I love that statement, right? But the net worth is okay. So you have value in it, but really the network and the relationships that you build are the things that get you opportunities. They're also the people that you can call when you're having a hard time and you need some advice, when you need to get a breakthrough. So you're building this relationship with all these people, and there's a really big difference here about building a relationship to use people, versus building a relationship to have that opportunities can come from. It's a balance, right? So that's one. The other is what's his name? Robert. He was the CIO of Sun, and back when I was there. And I remember when I first became a director, first executive position, we had to go sit down with executives and basically have a brainstorming session. And he told me something that I never forgot, and that was he goes, "Okay, so here you got this exec role, you got the responsibility, you got budget, you got people you're responsible for, and all that." And he goes, "No matter what, never forget where you came from." Okay. And he said, always consider if you were sitting on the other side of that table. Put yourself in that situation. Think about that. Never forget where you came from, right? And I felt that was extremely important. So I like to make sure that I have I'm grounded wherever I possibly can, right? I do the right thing by people to make sure that I'm honoring my relationships with people. And even in difficult things, when you have to do a layoff, when you have to do, you just treat people with respect, right? You treat people with the things that how you would want to be treated. So very basic things, but that has never led me wrong when it comes down to my career. So I would say that as you build, especially if you're new in an industry and you're new in this one, build a network, right? Build relationships, because you never know who you're going to work for or who's going to work for you. Build that up. Yeah.
Elaborate on your definition of being grounded. I really like that term, but I think to different people it has different subcomponents.
Try not to believe your own hype, drink your own Kool-Aid, all that stuff. The grounding part of this is that, everybody's replaceable. Doesn't matter what job you have, what you do, everybody's replaceable. So if you are always thinking about that you're not too big for your britches, and you really do keep yourself in check. And what's nice is I have other people check me as well. It's like I ask them if I'm in meetings and I'm starting to get too passionate about something, or I'm too rigid on something or whatever else. Let me know. And being open and receptive to that kind of thing is really important as well.
And do people take you up on your offer every now and then?
Oh yeah. Yeah. They do. And the reason they do is that they feel comfortable. Right? Because without that, they're not going to tell you.
Right.
Because if you say, open door policy, you can always give feedback, whatever else. And then when they come in and you discount them or you slam them for saying it, they're not going to come back.
Right.
Plain and simple. So you have to be open and grounded to make sure that when you receive feedback, you truly listen to it. That you have a, how would I say it? There's a guy named Dave House that he was the CEO of a startup company I was at, Allegro Networks, back in the day. As a matter of fact, he lives in Saratoga around me here. Right? Very wealthy guy. Very well respected. He did 25 years at Intel, and he's done very well. And when he took over the startup company, he, as the CEO, sat down with all 88 employees, right, groups of us all, and he said, "I'm going to teach you guys something, because I think it's very important to our culture, and it's called active listening." So we've all had a version of this at some point in our career, but it's like, he goes, when you're listening to somebody, are you already forming in your head the answer to what they've got before they finish? Then you're not listening.
Right.
Okay. So take that out, actively listen to what they're saying, repeat what they're saying to make sure that what you've heard is actually the right thing. And what you're doing is showing respect to the other person. That first off, you're listening, you're not multitasking, you're not discounting, you're not ignoring. And secondly, you have the respect to say, I believe it's this one, correct me if I got it wrong. Right? So I use that a lot. Like, does that make sense? Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah.
So I think that's a grounded part of it too. You should always be learning. You should always, if you ever get to the point where you believe you know it all, you're wrong.
Definitely.
There's somebody better than you. Somebody will kick you off that horse. Like, something is going to happen, because in the end of it, we're human, and humans have lots of experience and things, but you got to be learning all the time. So that's how I mean grounded, or how I define it. And
I noticed that you've also contribute to nonprofits that are not necessarily related to the infrastructure domain. I believe you have a nonprofit that you founded that helps just further education in the general sphere of the whole world. How did that get started?
Yeah, so it's called Just Let Me Learn, the Just Let Me Learn Foundation. And so when I was at Sun Microsystems, I took over an international team in India. And it was the first time that I'd actually managed internationally, right? And so I was traveling back and forth to Bangalore, India, a lot. And so I had a trip that was scheduled, and I was going alone. And so I called my mom and said, "Hey, I'm going to India. Do you want to just tag along with me?" She'd never been across an ocean, that kind of stuff. She's like, "Yeah, sure, that'd be great." So what I find out is my mom lives in the mountains of Colorado. She's a mountain woman, tough, can handle lots of types of things, right? So she reached out to people over the internet and found friends in India. I'm like, okay. And she goes, so I'm going to go visit them while, you're at work. I'm like, all right, so hold up. You're in India. It's a very different world. You've never been to a place like this. Yeah. We are going to go visit those people. If you're going to do that, I need to understand, right? Because it's about safety and everything else. Yeah. So then we just rescheduled, and then we flew up to a place called Patna. And I don't know if you've heard of Patna, India, right? But it used to be the capital of India, from what I understood before. But now it is one of the most poverty-stricken areas. So like it's really, really difficult there. And so she found a missionary. And so she went and we flew up to Patna. And here, get this. We were on an airplane, Air India, right? We're the only two Caucasians on the plane. And what was funny is there's people sitting next to her going, why are you going to Patna? Right? They're like, we don't have tourists in Patna, right? Like, oh, okay. And so then we get off the plane, and we walk over and we meet this guy. His name is Muhammad. And he goes in. He goes, "Welcome to Patna, the graveyard of missionaries." That was our first statements, right? I'm like, huh? Okay. Anyways, we then we went in. We got immersed, and it was like. So for people haven't been to India, especially in places like that, there's a lot of like trash burning in the streets and things that happen at night, especially in areas like that. And so when we were driving through, it literally looked like a war zone because there was so much smoke and everything else and things. So we get to this hotel and we go in. But then after that, the next day, smoke clears and things. It was a magical experience. And the reason I say it was magical is that we went to these schools and found these selfless people that were helping, right? And again, a very, very difficult area. And so they needed a school bus. Like they had people that couldn't afford to get their students over, and they're teaching them like dress and hygiene and other basic things before they teach them the right mathematics and science. And so they just needed to get in there. I'm like, okay, well, great. Well, we can go see what we can do. And so when I went back, we did a fundraiser, $12,000 and got them a bus. You know what I mean? And my mom in the middle of that said, I want to build a school. That was her thing. I'm like, you want to build a school? Okay. So you want to one-up me? Is that what you want to do, Mom? All right. So which is always fun. But fast forward, and now we've built 2 campuses. And we have over 1,000 students enrolled in those 2 campuses in the northeastern mountains of India. It's incredible. It all came from a statement that she made about wanting to do something. So we go over there every year, except for the pandemic we've been doing on, and it's incredible. So it's just one of those things, and it ties back to iMasons as well. One fun thing, we did a fundraising event, and we raised another $50,000. We finished the school, and then we wanted to weave this back into the scholarships to say, can we get these students that are graduating out of that one into digital infrastructure? Can you imagine, like? 10 years from now, they go back and say, I went to that school in Saipai, and now I'm over here and I'm running this thing in digital infrastructure. That to me is like that where I really want to get to, So we're influencing on that stuff. So that was a long story, but that's what I do on the charity side with my mom is run the Just Let Me Learn Foundation.
It's cool to do something with your parents. I feel like I would love to do something like that with my mom. Should I have more influence and power in some future stage of my life?
Yeah, it is extremely rewarding. And just think about it. You're on a trip with your mom, all the experiences of the flights, going to another country, learning with people, and then the pride of doing stuff with your mom. And like, they all call her mom. Like, they all run to her and, and she's like, these are all my children. And, like, it's just really incredible to watch. So yeah, it's extremely rewarding on multiple levels.
Well, I've been very grateful for your wisdom. I've loved your passion, and I recognize we're running out of time, but I just want to give you the floor for the people in the audience who want to follow you along your journey or just stay in touch with you. What's the best way for them to do so? Yeah,
the platform of choice is LinkedIn, so we all are connected there. So yeah, feel free to reach out on that. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I try to stay as in touch as I can. The other one is if you're in digital infrastructure, foundational. You should be a member of iMasons. It's open to anybody, right? So go join up. End users, the people that actually drive, the foundational decisions for that. It's free for end users. partners come in, it's like $99 a year, but the community we have is very rewarding. I would say to go there. And then folks that have data centers, go to virtualpowersystems.com, check out our thing called M9, because right now there is a significant amount of stranded capacity in data centers globally. And just to give a little picture of that one, there are 7 million data centers in the world, down from 8 million last year, by the way. There is 104 gigawatts of capacity built. 104 gigawatts, right? That is 594 terawatt hours of consumption, which represents 2.4% of the global energy draw, is attributed with digital infrastructure, right? There is at least 30 gigawatts that's stranded because of inefficiencies, buffers, and a whole bunch of things. So it's another labor of love that I've got here, but Virtual Power Systems is going to unlock that stranded capacity. We basically are enabling cloud-like flexibility on-prem and on-prem data centers. Okay.
So it's funny because I remember I first reached out to you, Dean, because I wanted to hear more about that side, but I'm very happy with where this conversation went. I love learning. I'm just here to learn. I don't care what I learn about as long as it's in the general same domain. And I think I'm going to leave the office today just feeling really inspired by your words. And I'm just really grateful for that. So thanks for joining us on the show.
Well, thank you, David. I really appreciate you having me on and listening. What an active listener. I really appreciate that.